Welcome back everybody, this is Wilder Action Birds and Bees. My name's Paul Wright. You can find my socials all down in the description, and if you just Google Wilder Action or @Birds and Bees, you'll find that on Flickr, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky. You'll find it all on there. Anyway, today I'm going to show you about minimum focus distance and how I would shoot with the gear I've got at that minimum focus distance to try and catch insects in flight. It's not quite as simple as it sounds, because you just think you go to your minimum focus distance and that's it. But insects move around so much and you need to give yourself space to shoot the insect, because if it's flying like this and you've just got it really zoomed on the insect, you're going to find that it's out of the frame before you can do anything. So what we try and do is give ourselves as much room as possible and without being too far away, so that we can crop in once we've finished. So we're not getting so close that the depth of field is like wafer thin. We really don't want it so it's like that. We don't want that. We want it to give ourselves a little bit from front to back of the insect or a bird, but I concentrate on insects. We really need to think about what we're doing when we use each lens. Every lens is different. So the equipment I have, I'm just going to go through as I'm picking it up. So we'll start with the oldest lens I've got here, which is the Sigma 150mm macro 2.8 EX DG, put a lot of acronyms in these things. Anyway, and this is non-stabilized. I think this is 2004, this lens. A lot of people used to ask me when I used to use Canon, what was my lens I used to use, and they'd buy it and they'd think, I can't use this. But I didn't just use the lens like this. I used the lens adaptive. To be honest, this is one of my trade secrets. I'm letting you lot all into it. I don't just always use lenses how they are. I use them, I experiment with my lenses, and that experimentation helps me to get the best shot that I can. One of the things you need to know about minimum focus distance is it's not from the end of the lens to the subject. It's from a point here, which is normally marked on your camera. See if I can zoom into it. If I put my face here, yeah, that point is where your sensor is on your camera. And all cameras have it marked somewhere, apart from maybe an iPhone or something like that. But they all have it marked so that you can see where your sensor plane is. And it's not from the end of the lens, it's from the sensor plane to the subject. That is the minimum focus distance. But shooting insects in flight, I wouldn't actually shoot it like this. I'm going to just size up on this bird that we have here. So that you understand the distances I shoot at, I'm just going to give you some quick specs. From the end of this table to this bird is actually 24 inches or 61 centimeters. If I was to shoot from the end of my plane here to that bird, I would get this size image. If I was to shoot minimum focus distance, actually easier to use the manual focus ring sometimes. My minimum focus distance is actually here. But as you'll see maybe in the pictures, it's not quite so easy to shoot at minimum focus distance, especially when you've got a subject that's moving. This subject's not moving, still not easy. And there's not a lot of light in this room as well for me to shoot it. If I was to shoot at my minimum, it would be up there. Shooting at the end of this table, I'd be able to get the full bird in from, pretty much the end of the table. So the photo I already showed you is the full bird in that shot. But an insect is smaller than that, isn't it? I've taken that lens off. I've got my control ring adapter here. And I've also got one of these. See if I can show it to you. It's called a Canon life-size converter, the EF. I found these years ago when I used to shoot DSLRs. And it used to go with a 50mm macro f2.5 from Canon from 1987. With my experimentations, I tried it on there and I thought, oh, it's an okay lens, but the lens was sharp, but for insects in flight, no good. It was a 50mm lens, too close really, and it was very, very jittery. So for macro, I do use autofocus. A lot of people say don't use autofocus for insects in flight. I do use autofocus. So I manually focus first, or I get it to as close as the subject first, and then I let the autofocus take over for as many shots as I can get that were in focus. So what we do, we line up our lines, mount that, and we mount it to this camera. This is how I used to shoot 2 years ago. I was shooting with the R5, the life-size converter, and this 150, maybe 3 years ago now actually. So what I would find, I could actually shoot further back. I don't know if you noticed that I'm probably a good 10-15 inches further away at this point. What that allows me to do is to let more light surround my subject, so I'm not getting too close. I mean, the shorter the lens you do this with is the more that actually matters. This is a 150mm lens. That's why I bought it, because I wanted that distance. But even at 150, sometimes you not only do you lose, you're not going to lose really a lot of light at that distance, but what you're doing is you're crowding the subject. And I deal with some things that want to sting you if you get too close, if you bother them. This allows me to get a bit further away, but keep the subject in the frame at that size. But what I found, don't get me wrong, I was getting great shots, but with my experimentation, I found that if I bought this, which is this is the 12mm EF extension tube, and I use this in conjunction with both of this, the lens and the life-size converter, and that gave me an even better chance. The reason for that is it gets me back to this kind of distance, but bigger in the frame. And remember I said this is big. If this was an insect, insects are much smaller. So this allowed me to keep at a good distance with a much bigger subject in the frame. It does require a lot more skill to use it like this, because now you're closer, your depth of field becomes wafer thin again, because you're getting that bit closer. You've got serious magnification going on here now. So now that lens has become a lot bigger and a lot heavier, but I'm getting a much bigger subject in the frame. People think I just literally get up to the subject like this and I shoot like that. I don't really shoot like that. I will show you a lens that I do that with, and that's my latest lens. That's the way I was shooting for quite a few years, and that was getting me amazing results. That is my secret weapon that a lot of you guys asked me about. Probably go, I think you can find these now for maybe about £80. I don't know, they fluctuate in price, but yeah. And then that to go with it, the lens as well. So you come up to a bit of money there, but that's still a lot cheaper than what you pay for a new lens nowadays. And that took me a few years to find that out and discover that, and you've just discovered that in the length of this video. But you might not want to use this. That's the thing. It's all well and good me using this and telling you I use this lens and I use this equipment. This might not work for you. I've had people buy this lens and say it's no good. I can shoot this lens without this stuff and still get great results. I find it better with this, but it requires more skill to use it. Like, you really have to think about your aperture when you're using this now. You're even at a kind of different focal length. What I haven't actually told you about this life-size converter is it acts as one of these, which is a macro ring, combined with a teleconverter. It's like a 2-in-1, but the problem with this is it also reduces the maximum focus distance. So you cannot focus to infinity, and you're quite restricted once you put this on. So anything happens outside of a certain focal range, you cannot shoot it because you'll just have a blur there. You won't even be able to focus on it. It will just be a blur. As much as I loved using this, it did cause me pain sometimes where I missed shots that I would have got otherwise. So I'm going to put this aside now. I'm only putting the lens aside because I'm going to tell you this works with other EF lenses. In fact, it works with any other EF lens on a mirrorless camera. It won't work with a DSLR. And I always thought that years ago. I used to think to myself, if only they could make this work properly, this would be brilliant. I don't know if they'll ever bring out a new version of this because it is still a bit jittery, especially with the Sigma lenses. But like I said, if you use it correctly, you can get amazing results with it. I've even used this with a 500mm Sigma f4 lens and got some amazing damselfly shots with this. Yeah, you can use this with almost any EF lens and it'll be brilliant on a mirrorless. And I'm not sure if this will work on every R camera, as in work as good, but definitely with the R5 and definitely with the R7. I've tried it with both of those cameras and it definitely worked well. That's because they've got good autofocus systems. You might find that the other ones with lesser autofocus systems don't work as well. This is an EF mount Sigma 180mm. So from the edge of the table, this is from the sensor plane to the subject. That is quite big in the frame, to be honest, and that's without putting anything on it. Right, everybody, this is several hours after I just picked up this camera. Had to go back in to deal with the family, and you know what family life's like. So yeah, this is probably a good 4 hours after I first started, so hopefully I haven't lost too much of a train of thought here. But this lens is really good, but it's really heavy. It's a 180mm macro. It's brilliant as far as flight shots go. You can adapt this and put these other bits on. Well, this has now run out of battery anyway, this Canon. I haven't been charging these lately, so very big though. I mean, look, even without the hood, that's it by itself. And if I was to put these adaptive parts on it. You see it's even comes into a much bigger, to make it like the other one was. I mean, that's like a bazooka. That's almost like well, it is. It's kind of like a telephoto lens. If I showed you, this is my 1-to-400mm Nikon lens. Zoom it out so we still get an idea of how big that is. Yeah, that's a pretty big mass you've got there. I'm gonna put that all over there because I don't need that anymore. This Nikon, even though it's a 1-to-400mm, so this is actually a telephoto lens. I can't shoot it from here where I was shooting the macros from. I would have to be, that's my minimum focus distance here. So we're probably a good 20 centimeters further away now than I could shoot easily with the macro lenses. But we're quite big in the frame at that distance. Plus, obviously I haven't had this lens long. What I will do, and what I used to do with my Canon 1-to-400 and Canon 1-to-500 was, you can play with different things. So if you've got a teleconverter, which I put on now, you can actually make that bigger in the frame now. So your minimum focus distance won't change because you're using a teleconverter, but whatever you shot will be bigger in the frame at the closest distance. My minimum focus distance now should be exactly the same. It's just that because it's now got a 1.4 converter on it, whatever I'm shooting will be larger in the frame by 1.4 times. This is a macro ring. This is a pretty plasticky macro ring from Rxiv, but it works the same as a metal one, except for it's probably not just as sturdy like the metal ones I've got here from Canon. And this life-size converter, by the way, is full-on metal. But it's probably more solid than the macro ring I've got here. And it also, what you don't know, you'll see there is no glass in here. I could poke myself in the eye. With this life-size converter, it has glass. So you're getting glass in there for your money as well. So it does change the optical standard of your lens. This won't change anything apart from giving you a better minimum focus distance. This will change the optical qualities of your lens. So you need to be prepared to stop down maybe, or when they stop down, it means change your aperture. This one again has no glass in it, this Rxiv. So you just pop that on. I could get my minimum focus distance at 400mm. Where are we? We're not massively closer, but we are closer, and that's using a 24mm macro ring. I would suggest not trying to use the 2x converter on any of these, because any glass you have always impacts the image quality. Always, no matter what anyone says, it will impact the image quality. But you can use a 1.4. You could probably use a 2x, but you'd need to be prepared to step it down even more. Yeah, but you can use a 1.4, and then you've got the same thing. So now I can get closer, and it will be bigger in the frame. So, oh yeah, I mean, I'm not 100% sure because I haven't even looked at this properly. It's going to make it a bit brighter. I'm not really doing the brightness levels on this because I don't want to sod around with that. But yeah, that was bigger in the frame, definitely. So that allowed me to get closer, and it allowed me to get larger in the frame. All right, so we're going to put that aside now, and we'll move on to this 70-180. This is like a cheaper version of a 70-200 f2.8. But you know what, compared the size-wise and the price-wise and the weight-wise, well, worth doing it, to be honest. The thing to note about this lens is the minimum focus distance at the longest end, which I prefer shooting at the longest end, not the shortest end, at 180, yeah, is longer than the shortest end. I think the maximum magnification is actually better. Well, I can definitely get closer. Look, minimum focus distance. Wow, that's actually surprised me there. The minimum focus distance, yeah, and it's definitely bigger in the frame at 70 than it is at 180. But what did I say before? We want space to give ourselves, so whatever's here is not getting frightened. We need that space, unless I was doing a proper macro shot and I was trying to get as large as possible in a frame. But if I'm shooting insects in flight, I want to give it a bit of space between me and the subject. So I'd rather shoot at the 180 end. And shooting at the 180 end on this, it's okay. But you've got to remember, this is 180, so it's nowhere near as big in the frame as the 100-400 would have been. And the same with that 100-400, I probably could have wound it into 100 and shot closer, but I'm pretty sure with most 100-400s or that kind of focal length, the better maximum ratio is actually at the longer end. But with this lens, it's at the shorter end, not the longer end. Again, we can do this with this lens. We've got the hole in the back, so we can put an extender on. I'm not going to bother taking the macro ring off this time. I'm going to do it all in one, but we can definitely get ourselves closer at the longer end now. Same again. I'm going to pull that in. Where are we? We are much bigger in the frame there. Surprisingly, not that much. I thought that would have been a massive difference. It's good to experiment. I actually thought that would be a massive difference between the longer end. So this is just the macro ring now. So I'm trying it with the macro ring. This is me experimenting. I didn't know. Quite baffled here because, yeah, it doesn't make it that much bigger in the frame without it, but it definitely makes it bigger in the frame. And wow, it's pretty much the same size with and without this macro ring on it. So let me just try something. See, when I say to you guys I experiment, this is the kind of thing I do. We all got this idea in our head before we put something on, and we think we know, but see, even I don't know. I'm always trying, testing, pushing the boundaries. This is just with a 1.4 teleconverter on. So if I was to shoot at the 70mm end, it pretty much comes out the same as it would with the extras on. Lens to 180, teleconverter, and the macro ring on, and I will be at almost identical size to the 70mm end. So that's something I've just worked out that I didn't know before. So that would actually be quite good in the field, especially as this lens now would be roughly maybe 240mm with the extender on. With that on as well, remember what I said to you, as soon as you put that on, you cannot focus to infinity. This is me really learning now. I want to see what happens if I take this to 70mm now. We're going to hit this bird in the head with the front of this lens now. That's quite big. That is quite big in the frame. And now I'm going to put that bit on to get at this kind of magnification now. If this was like in the wild, I'm going to even have to up the ISO because I can't even see the subject properly. Really hard trying to get a shot at this kind of distance. We're making it all wafer thin again. Yes, 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 that is much larger in the frame. Wow, the difference of that is crazy. So putting those two bits on at 70mm takes that into pretty much macro territory. And I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to see how good that really is now. I don't know about quality wise, I couldn't tell you that in real terms unless they were proper charts and things like that. But this is the actual 105 2.8S Z lens, and this is a 1:1 macro. So when I put this at minimum focus distance, I'm at 1:1. So whatever size of the subject is there, it will be the same as on the back of my screen. That's what 1:1 ratio means. I'm going to have to manually do this because the lens is struggling. Oh, this is wafer thin. This is really thin depth of field. Got a lovely fall off. I mean, if I just wanted to make that aesthetically pleasing just on the eye, that's amazing. But anyway, I wouldn't do that because literally you couldn't get anything in focus like that. But let me just see the difference. Wow, that has actually wowed me. So this with this getup is actually larger than the 1:1 magnification on the 105 macro. And you know what? It actually has a better depth of field. It has less fall off at 70mm than that has at 100. I mean, that makes sense to be quite honest because now it's not 70mm. Times that by 1.4, I don't know what that works out. It's probably about the same focal length to be honest, but it has a larger magnification ratio. The problem now is this does not fit physically on this lens. This will not, it butts up at the end of the glass here. Luckily it's rubber, yeah? It will not physically go in there. That, I don't know if you can see that. It's supposed to slot inside the little thing there. It'll go in this lens, but it will not go in this lens. But I can use this macro ring, which should, I've never tried this because I don't need to. Normally I'm shooting insects in flight. I don't want to be this close. Minimum focus distance. I'm literally going to manually focus that again. Move in. Right, so we're definitely much larger in the frame now. We're probably at about a 2:1. No, not 2:1, sorry. A 1.25 or 1.3 to the other way around ratio. So it's actually larger in the frame than it is there at close distance. If you're trying to do like close macro, that might be a good setup, but I don't do that kind of macro. And like I said, the closer now we get in, as you saw how close I mean, that I was probably about that close to that. Using the hood would be really stupid on that because you wouldn't be able to get any light in. It would be covering this subject with shadow. So you'd probably have to take the hood off and introduce lighting into that. But that's why I don't use flash. Right, so what I like about this lens, this is now my go-to lens over the other one. Even though I said I have to get in pretty close, it's actually allowing me to shoot without anything. I shoot it like this. I literally shoot it, nothing else on the lens, and I'm shooting probably larger stuff, maybe about here. But I found when you get the really tiny insects, I'm able to get right in now, and I'm shooting at this kind of distance to them, and it's still allowing me light around the subject. As long as I watch my light, it's allowing me light around the subject. So I'm able to get in much closer than I used to get with the other lenses, and it's so good. Basically I can just hand hold this with video now for insects. So I do this for insects in flight, and I do it for insects that are on stuff as well, handheld, because I don't carry stuff with me ever. So literally this is it. That's my kit to go out and do macro now. One thing I'll say about this lens that I don't like, there is no stabilization in this lens. It has stabilization in the body, fantastic. This lens has stabilization in the lens and the body, and together they really stabilize. This handheld makes me jittery. It makes me, you can see, because I'm not very stable at all. People must think because I get in all these shots in flight that I'm really stable. I'm not. Because I use fast shutter speeds, that negates any of the shakiness. When you're doing video, it's a different matter, and this is not a good video lens for handheld. It's brilliant for almost everything else, and it's about the only real downside that I've seen to this, plus the stupid petal hood. We know what I feel about metal hoods, petal hoods. Other than that, absolutely amazing. I don't know from specs, because I haven't looked at spec sheets. They're pretty much the same. And this is probably a touch heavier, but then you get the versatility of the 70 to 180. This is a 105 fixed length. This is definitely sharper, but wow, as a walk around, catch everything. You could go out with this, and this, and I could even probably catch birds in flight with that. Bigger birds, yeah, or closer birds, definitely. But you could walk around with that and you could catch things. And this would probably be, I haven't had much chance, like I said, a quite good butterfly lens as well. I prefer to be much further away with butterflies, give them space to move around the frame. But anyway, right, so we move both of them across now. At all times, just remember, I'm looking for my perfect distance for shooting insects in flight. I'm not trying to get at a macro distance. If you get at macro distance, you're probably going to miss most of what I catch. You need to get yourself at a good level that you feel comfortable with. But each lens has a different level, and I cannot tell you what that is. I just know it in my head once I've used the lens for a little bit. When I was using that 150mm that I showed you earlier here with the see, clumsy. With this and the macro ring, say the subject was here, I was probably back here shooting it. I found that a very comfortable level. I can't do that with the Nikon gear anyway, even though I'm much closer. I'm definitely getting more shots in flight of smaller insects now than I ever was with the Canon. And they're much sharper. I'm finding myself getting details I could never get before, and I'm finding myself getting situations I could never get before. Like I'd always wanted them like two insects in the same frame, and I didn't know what they were doing until I started catching them with the Z8 and the Z9. That some of them are fighting, some of them are doing the other F, but I'm not going to use that word. It's amazing. Anyway, last Nikon lens, Nikon lens I have here. Now you can't see this. You can see the bird in front of us, but I've put a bird right at the back. And like I said, this is about a good 4 hours after I started this. It was daytime when I started this. I'm not sure how much of this you're going to be able to see now. I can tell you now, from the front of this desk to where that silver bird is, we've now got a silver bird, is 154 inches or 393 centimeters, so just under 4 meters. And I know for a fact I can't shoot it with this lens. I do this, I'm out of focus. I cannot focus on that bird. Let me see, even if I move as far back as I can go. I'm going to take that shot for you anyway, just to show you that I can't shoot that. A few moments later. I've now put the macro ring on here. This is the Viltrox again. And like I said to you before, putting one of these teleconverters on doesn't change the minimum focus distance. So even if I put that on, from here, I still wouldn't be able to shoot it. So I can actually shoot that now. So it's longer than, because it's got to be from back there probably roughly around about 5 meters. I'm able to get that bird in focus now beyond that limit, but before I wouldn't have been able to get it. Now, like I said to you before, if I wanted to up the size of the thing in the frame, what I then do is put the teleconverter on it. So again, it doesn't change our minimum focus distance, but added with that macro ring, it should get a larger subject in the frame, even with this 800mm. So this would be good. It wouldn't be great, but something like a dragonfly at distance. It wouldn't get you anything close, and to be perfectly honest, there's quite so much distance between, you might not get a lot of detail. But you would definitely be able to use this to get yourself some kind of insect in flight. Okay, even though that's an 800mm fixed focal length, that has a ridiculously long minimum focus distance. That's my Nikon gear that I use. I have never used that 800mm for insects, but I've done it with like a 500mm with an extender on it, which makes it obviously 700. I've just thought of that. When you put the extender on, it actually turns the lens into something like an 1120mm lens at f9. So yeah, you got a lot of length there, which is why I was struggling to find it in the viewfinder in my outbuilding while I'm leaning against something trying to get my body. Yeah. So anyway, I'm now down to the last two pieces I've got, and these are two Sonys. I've got the Sony RX10 Mark IV here, and I have the Sony RX100 Mark V here. Good little cameras. Love this one, and did love this one. Got another story to tell you about another service centre, but we won't go there yet. But it's the reason why I've never ever bought another Sony camera. But anyway, this has an amazing ability where you can shoot wide, very close. So I can get very, very close to this. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. But again, if I was shooting insects in flight, which I have done with this lens, just this camera, just so that you know, 20 frames a second, just like the R5 and the Z9. I think the autofocus pretty much came from, not from the A9, but very top end Sony camera. So yeah, you can shoot at the wide end macro. Might actually try that in the summer, that might be quite fun. And then this is now 600mm f4. That is 600 f4, yeah? What we can also do is we can shoot very close. I've got to find the minimum. It's harder to find the minimum focus distance on this than it was with the other ones because it's harder for me to manually focus. Wow. It's definitely better. You get a better maximum magnification shooting at the shorter end, the longer end on this, sorry, not the shorter end. So at 600mm, you'll get your insects in flight. You can do it at the shorter end, but you're going to be so much closer. You're going to find it a lot harder, unless it's something like a colony, where you can just hold the camera there, look in the back and just press the trigger. You would find it much easier to do it at the 600 end with it to your eye, you know, looking for a subject. I think it's got a 1 meter or less minimum focus distance. So this I love. I'm going to tell you this, when I had my D850 and D500, this used to beat it at certain things, especially for getting in focus shots. So this bridge camera, expensive one, was beating the DSLR, D850 and the D500. And you know how good those were. Both of those cameras are legendary. This to me is a legendary camera. The only reason I don't use it is because I have other gear. And it's the only reason I don't use it. Really, I should be using this when I go on holiday, but I'm so hell-bent on getting the best quality images I can. I find it hard to bring something that might not give me that, because the downside of this is it's 24 megapixels, but it is a 2.7 times cropped sensor. So when it comes to low light, I can only push this camera to get a very good, decent image around about 640, 800. 800 it probably starts cracking up, whereas I can take the Canon and the Nikon. The Canon I've taken up to 8000 ISO, and the Nikon maximum I've taken that to about 5000. I'm not saying I can't go higher, but that's what I've maxed out at the moment. So yeah, so you can shoot macro with this, and you can shoot insects in flight with this. It's not macro, it's like pseudo macro again. It's not one-to-one magnification, but it's big enough for you to be able to get it. And then you can crop in a little bit, but not a lot, which is why I like the high megapixel sensors. It's still good. What you need to do is get your image as sharp as possible, then crop in. Don't let anybody tell you don't crop in. That's what you do. Get it as sharp as possible, give it some room in the frame, because as soon as you try and get too close, you're going to find it so much harder. Don't get too close. Yeah, it's 24mm to 70mm. This Sony was 24mm at the wide end to 600mm. and you can stop anywhere in between that you like as well. So this one, you can pretty much do the same thing. So, but there's, oh yeah, we have. I just remembered that. I haven't used it in so long. Yeah, look at that. I do love that. We can now use an eyepiece to frame this up. And this one opens up to 1.8, whereas that one only opens up to 2.4. But they change, they're both variable. I can get in quite, I've never used this for macro. Again, I'm gonna try this year, might as well. Camera sitting there doing nothing, why not try, eh? So now we're going to try the long end and see how much difference that made. And if you saw how close I got with the minimum focus distance on that, zoom that into 70 millimeters. And when I say allowing me to get, I have to get pretty close to get a semi-decent shot. Sorry about that sound, it's the chair. Well, we have the same thing again that we had with the 70 to 180 on the Nikon. It's actually larger in the frame at 24 millimeters than it is at 70 millimeters, but definitely 100%. I mean, it's not much of a difference, to be honest, the size wise, but I would definitely want to be at the 70 mil end. I wouldn't want to be at the 24 millimeter end. It's just way too close. If that was an insect of any sort that wanted to sting me or that I was going to aggravate, I wouldn't want it that close. It's just too close. So the 70 mil end would be better. That is all the gear I've got. One thing I never said is, let me just turn this off. Such a nifty little camera, to be honest. I can't remember. Oh, you've got to push that in. Look, you push that in, push that down, and look at that. It's quite sexy when I think about it. The only problem is, I'll probably do it in a minute, it switches itself back on. Yeah, one thing I didn't show you, any lens that has a thread on it, you can buy something like this. It's not this is just glass. This is just there to protect the lens. But it's almost like this. So, a lot of people I know, especially for Olympus, they use Ranox ones. It's called a Ranox, and all it is a bit of a magnifying glass, and you put it to any lens, and it will change your minimum focus distance. It lets you get in that bit closer, and it's very good glass to add to your own glass. It's not just a cheap bit of glass that does nothing. It's like an actual magnifying glass that attaches to your lens properly. So basically it'll be like this. I'm not going to tighten that too much. That's the one bad thing about filters. They can get stuck on the end if you over tighten them. So all it is something like that. You probably can't even see that. Let me just put it in front. Bring it towards you. This is just the skylight one, yeah? And all that does, just makes a bit of magnification from here to the lens, and it makes your subject bigger again. Even if I had this at the 600 millimeter end and I did this and it had one of those on, I'd be able to make it bigger in the frame, which probably would work for this scenario, to be honest, because like I said, you like to be able to crop in, and this is only 24 megapixels, so it would be nice because it gives you that extra bit. That's everything. Hope that helped a little bit, because a lot of people asked me that. I did show it on the very, very first video I did of me out in the field doing that. Obviously, when summer comes again this time, I'm going to show you guys, literally I'm going to have a camera on top of my camera, showing me, showing the distance I am, showing if I'm going to drill a little hole into the end of my lens hood and have it mounted on there just for you guys, because I need you lot to see how I shoot. So it'll be spinning round showing me, and it'll be spinning round showing the subject at the same time. By then as well, I'm going to have a viewfinder recorder as well, so you'll be able to see the settings going on as we're shooting, as we're recording. Everything will be done all in one go. These are exciting things to come. This is Wilder Action, Birds and Bees, Paul Wright.